So students, today's lecture is going to be about the different kinds of publication or different kinds of publishing there are, right? And we are going to begin by talking about the commercial publisher, right? And commercial publisher is also sometimes referred to as the traditional publisher. Now, a traditional publisher, and as you must have already guessed, a publisher is someone who publishes something for you, right? If you are an author, you are going to take your work to a publisher and the publisher will publish it for you, right? Now, there are different kinds of publishers, and that's exactly what we are talking about here. So, as I was saying, commercial publishers, also known as traditional publishers, are the first kind of publishers that we are going to talk about in today's lecture. So, what do commercial or traditional publishers do? So, if you have a book, if you have a manuscript, to be more specific, let's say you have spent some time writing a story or writing a novel maybe, or it could be any other kind of work that you have written, and now you have taken it to a publisher and you have told them that, see, I have written this book, are you interested in publishing this? And depending on the quality of your work, or also depending on what that publisher usually publishes, right? Now, there are publishers who publish only a certain kind of novels. There are publishers who publish a different kind of novels, or maybe there are publishers who do not publish novels at all. There are publishers who only bring out, say, academic books, right? So these are things that you must already be aware of, but the point of today's lecture is to have a more formalized knowledge about the publishing industry and what the different kinds of publishing there are. So, as I was saying, let's say you have a book and you go to a publisher, and if the publisher thinks that, okay, this is a book which is worthy of publication, and if they are interested, then they are going to buy the rights to publish that author's manuscript, in this case your manuscript, and there is an agreement, right? And the agreement is most commonly exclusive, and typically the author receives a royalty advance against future sales, right? And commercial publishers, or traditional publishers as they are often called, are the most selective of the four types of publishers. There are three other kinds of publishers, we are going to talk about them later. So commercial publishers are the most selective, as I mentioned previously, that they are not going to just publish any book. First of all, they are going to have a look at what kind of book you have written. If it's a novel, if it's an academic book, that is going to make a difference, because like I said, some publishers publish only novels, or say even if they publish novels, they publish only science fiction novels. It is possible. At the same time, there are publishers who will not publish any novels at all, right? There are publishers who publish only comic books. You see, so these are the differences, and hence commercial publishers are the most selective, right? So you take your manuscript to them, they're not going to publish it just because you have written a book. It has to satisfy, the book that you have written has to satisfy several criteria, which is in accordance to the commercial publisher. Now, as I was saying, commercial publishers are the most selective of the different types of publishers, and they take only a very small percentage of the manuscripts they receive for consideration, right? So usually they will receive hundreds of manuscripts. You won't be the only author sending manuscripts to them, right? There will be hundreds of authors, and these publishers are so selective that only a very small percentage, maybe 2 or 3% of the manuscripts that they have collected get published. Now, these publishers handle all facets of publication, and by all facets, I mean they take care of everything from the initial author submission to producing the final product, right? They even fund the advertising, promotion, and other necessary items to create public awareness and a demand for that book, right? You see, if you have a manuscript which you expect will be published as a book, it's not that, first of all, it's not that the publisher will automatically accept it just because you have written it. Second of all, just because you have written it, and just because even if the publisher has accepted your book for publication, that doesn't guarantee that your book will be sold, right? There has to be a demand for that book. Now, for there to be demand, there has to be advertising, there has to be promotions, etc., etc., right? The different processes of, how the publishing industry works after sales. and also after production, right? Not just after sales, after production as well. So commercial publishers usually take care of all of this, from taking your manuscript to choosing your manuscript to printing it to advertising it, and finally to even distributing it, right? Distributing it to the shops, or even perhaps to the websites from where that book will be sold, right? So essentially these publishers, commercial publishers or traditional publishers, they fund the actual production of the book and the distribution channels, making it available to the public, right? After the book sells, generating royalties that exceed the initial royalty advance, the author is paid royalties on sales, right? This is usually the production process of commercial publishers, and royalties can vary. Royalties can be maybe 10% of the price of the book, it could be 12%, right? That depends on the publisher, and also depends on the negotiation between the publisher and the author, right? But usually under commercial publication, the author does not have to bear any cost. It's not like you have written the book and you will only tell the publisher that you publish it for me, I'll pay you for publishing. That is not how traditional or commercial publication works, right? So the motive for the commercial publisher is to drive profit from the sale of that book, right? So this is the first kind of publisher. Now let's have a look at the second kind of publisher. This kind of publisher is called subsidy publisher. Now these publishers enter into an agreement with the author to publish the manuscript, and the agreement is typically non-exclusive, right? Try and understand the difference between exclusive deals and non-exclusive deals. I told you a few minutes ago while talking about commercial publishers that the agreement is mostly exclusive. So let's say there is a publisher called Penguin, right? You must have all heard of Penguin Publisher. It's a very famous publisher, and they bring out lots of books every year, right? So if you go to Penguin, usually, and let's say Penguin accepts your book, they say, okay, your book is good, we will publish this book, and then they will make an agreement with you, and that agreement will be exclusive. By exclusive I mean that once you give that book to Penguin, and once Penguin has agreed that we are going to publish this book, then you cannot take that manuscript to any other publisher, right? You cannot take to, say, Oxford, right? There Oxford is a rival to Penguin, say, or there are other publishers, right? Let's just take the examples of Penguin and Oxford. So if it is an exclusive deal, then that manuscript, that book will be published only by Penguin and not by other publishers. And subsidy publishers, on the other hand, when they make an agreement, those are usually non-exclusive, right? And so if they are non-exclusive, then the author has the rights, right? And if the author has all the rights of the book, right, then he or she can take that same manuscript to another publisher and they may also publish it. You see, so the same book can be published by 2 or more different publishers, and this is in the case of subsidy publication. Okay, so the main thing that you need to remember here is that in subsidy publishing, the author retains the ownership of the work. All right. In the case of commercial publishing or traditional publishing, the author does not retain the right to publish the book. The right to publish the book is given away to the commercial publisher. Okay. Now, in the case of subsidy publisher, it is more of a partnership between publisher and the author, wherein the author makes a financial commitment to subsidize a portion of publication costs. Okay. And beyond this, there is no additional financial commitment required from the author. And the terms of the agreement define the specific obligations of the publisher and the author. The author in these cases, in this kind of publishing, the author is usually required to make more efforts in the marketing and promotion of the book than in the traditional format. Remember, a few moments ago, while talking about commercial publisher, I told you that these publishers will handle all the facets of production, right? From accepting your copy to printing it, to deciding what the price of that book will be, to distributing it to different sellers. All of that is handled by the publisher itself in the case of commercial publisher. However, in the case of subsidy publication, all of that is not done by the publisher. So the author himself or herself has to participate in promoting the book, right, in advertising the book. The author has to do it through social media. These days these are done, no? So that the author will have to do in the case of subsidy publication. And the publisher does handle many facets of production, from the author submission to producing or printing the product. Okay, they also do fund the advertising, promotion and other necessary items to create public awareness, but the involvement of the author here is a bit more than in the case of commercial publishing. So royalties, again there is the concept of royalties here as well in subsidy publication, but usually the royalties are comparatively higher than commercial publications. Now in commercial publishers, I told you that usually it could be 10%, 12%. It is decided, there is an agreement, there is a negotiation between the author and the publisher, and that price is dependent, and the royalty is dependent on that negotiation. Often you will see there are very famous authors, superstar authors, celebrity authors who get more royalties because they have more negotiating power. Now if you are a new author, you probably will have to agree to what the publisher will give you. If the publisher says, okay, you will get 8% royalty, you will probably have to accept it. But if you have more negotiating power, let's say you have published 3 books and now you are a very famous author, and the demand for your books are very high, so then that gives you more leverage while negotiating the deal about royalties. Now coming back to subsidy publishers, I said that royalties are typically higher, right? And you see subsidy publishers are generally less selective than traditional publishers, and they take a larger percentage of the manuscripts they receive for consideration, right? In contrast, commercial publishers take a much smaller percentage. If they get 100 books, they will publish say maybe 2 or 3, but in the case of subsidy publishers, that percentage is a bit more. If they receive 100 manuscripts, they will end up publishing say 10 or 15, right? That is also a small number, but it is much larger when you compare it with commercial publishers. And here as well, the publisher derives profit from the sale of the book. That is the main motive of the publisher. Now then there are vanity publishers, right? This is the third kind of publication. We are going to talk about a total of 4 today, and the third kind of publisher is called a vanity publisher. So you see, a vanity publisher is one of those companies which will enter into an agreement with the author to publish the book's manuscript, and depending upon the terms of the agreement, the author may retain specific rights and may also be required to fund the bulk of the cost in the production of the book. You see, so in vanity publishing, it's not like the previous two where the publisher itself was responsible for the production cost. And by production cost, you already know that to publish any book, you have to acquire paper, you have to pay people for deciding the layout of that paper, how the book will look like, how the book will feel like, what will be the length of the book, what will be the thickness of the book, etc., what kind of color will be used, right? So all of those decisions in the case of subsidy and commercial publishers are made by the publishers. Now obviously the authors may have some leverage, but in the case of vanity publisher, the author has more leverage, and it is the author who in most cases has to bear the cost of producing the book. Now other arrangements may require little or no initial author funds, but editing, design, marketing, promotion, distribution and other services may need to be purchased separately from the publisher. Okay, these are not given by default as in the case of subsidy and commercial publication. And vanity publishers usually generate the bulk of their incomes from sales to their authors, you see. So there are a lot of authors who will get in agreement with vanity publishers, and the publishers, they will produce the books, say 1,000 copies of a book, and the author himself or herself will buy those books from the vanity publisher. And then once the author is in possession, he or she will sell them, distribute them separately, right? So let's say you have written a book and you have entered into an agreement with a vanity publisher. You have borne the cost of say 1000 copies of your book, and you are obviously directly involved. Now you have already published 1000 copies, printed 1000 copies, and you have paid the vanity publishers, and the books are now in your possession. Now once they are in your possession, it is your responsibility as to how you are going to promote them, whether on social media, whether you are going to distribute them to different booksellers. Let's say you are going to give 50 copies of your book to 10 different booksellers in College Street, right? You have to then enter into agreements with those booksellers. Now in the previous two cases, subsidy and commercial publishing, it is the publisher itself who takes care of all this. But in the case of vanity publisher, the author pays for the publishing, pays for all of that, takes the book in his or her possession, and then decides on what procedure to go about when it pertains to the selling of the book. Now once again, in these kind of publications as well, there is the concept of royalties, and royalties in these cases are more variable, and they are based on the specific agreement with the publisher. Now in the previous cases, usually there is this 8% to 12%, 20% to 40%. In vanity publishing, there is no, there isn't any predefined percentage which you have to abide by, and this all comes to negotiation. And usually vanity publishers maintain extensive websites offering their authors' books for sale. And if the publisher funds the entire cost of production, the book is usually offered for sale at a higher price than comparable books, allowing the publisher to recoup their investment. So finally, we are going to talk about one more kind of publisher, and with that we'll end this lecture. So this kind of publisher is called self-publisher. Now the title gives it all away, right? And in this case, the author handles everything needed to get their work into print. And in most instances, the author contracts with companies providing self-publishing services such as printing, ISBN number, editing, etc. You'll see that all books have an ISBN number. You pick up any book at random, whether it's an academic book or whether it's a story book, and you look at the insides of the book. If you look at the back cover, you'll find that an ISBN number is written. So ISBN number is necessary for book publication. And in the previous three cases, in the case of vanity publishing, subsidy publishing, and commercial publishing, it is the publisher who provides you with all of these things, ISBN number, printing, and all of that, but also editing. But in this case of self-publisher, the author has to get into a contract, has to find a service which will do the printing, which will provide the ISBN number, which will also perhaps provide the editing. And the author funds the entire cost of production and publication from manuscript to the completion of the book. You see, the entire cost is borne by the publisher. Marketing, promotion, distribution, and other facets of making the book available for sale are either contracted for or provided by the author. So usually either there is a contract or it is done entirely by the author. Because the author funds the entire production of the book, full ownership and rights are retained in addition to all proceeds from sales. You see, in the previous cases there was a issue as to who holds the rights of the book. Both in the case of subsidy publishing and commercial publishing, we saw that rights are usually held by the publishers. Though in subsidy publication, the author can hold the rights and can enter into agreements with multiple authors. But in self-publishing, the rights of the publication are held entirely by the author, which means that if the author wants to enter into a contract with a different publisher 2 years down the line, he or she is free to do that. So, as I was saying, the author funds the entire cost of production and publication from manuscript to the completion of the book. So, marketing, promotion, distribution, and all the other facets of making the book available for sale are either, subject to a contract, or the author has to do all of that himself or herself. And in the publishing industry, a self-published author is generally not considered a published author any more than someone who has starred in their own home movie is considered a movie star. But then again, self-publishing is on the rise, and India is one of the countries where self-publishing is quite popular, and there are a lot self-publishing services, because in India a lot of people for some reason want to be authors. So overall, these are the 4 kinds of book publishing that I wanted to speak to you about today, and with that I end today's lecture.